Mayhem Brawler is a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up that is heavily inspired by the arcade games of the 1990s. The Switch has some cracking beat-em-ups already, to be fair. We've made a video about some of the best, in fact. I'll stick a link to that in the top pinned comment. But can this one brawl with the best, or does it crawl with the rest? I'm Glen Bolger, thank you to the publishing team for the review code, and now let's find out. Mayhem Brawler takes place in what it calls an urban fantasy universe. The three main characters, Star, Dolphin and Trouble, are police officers, but each with a superhero type ability, and the world also contains many other classic character types from popular culture, such as vampires, lycanthropes, zombies and wizards. The story is told via static cutscenes in between levels, and you'll be able to make a few choices along the way that will shape the ending you get from 3 different ones available. So gameplay wise, Mayhem Brawler is a side-scrolling beat-em-up, and in terms of basic mechanics, plays very similarly to most other games in the genre. You move from left to right as a 2D character on a 3D plane, with the screen locking every so often until you defeat all enemies, and then you continue onward with each level ending with a boss fight. It's not at all backwards in coming forwards with regards to its inspiration, strongly citing the arcade beat-em-ups of the 90s, and whilst that's certainly true, there's a heavy final fight vibe in some respects. For example, I would argue it's actually a console beat-em-up series that it borrows the most heavily from, being Sega's Streets of Rage. You get to pick from the 3 main characters and then take on the game's campaign mode, which consists of 7 levels. You'll find a variety of weapons that you can pick up, such as guns, knives and bats, and food items that restore your health. The inspiration of the aforementioned games transcends into these types of foods, with the familiar apples and roasted meats being used, and each of the enemies has a health bar that must be whittled down in order to defeat them. You yourself also have a health bar as well as a power meter, and when this meter has 1 full bar, you can perform a special attack by pressing X. It's not the screen clearing attacks found in some beat-em-ups, but it will damage any enemies in close proximity, and is a good move to use if you find yourself being held or surrounded at any point. Each of the 3 available characters has their own strengths and weaknesses, but it basically boils down to one being stronger but slower, one being faster but a little weaker, and the third one being an all-rounder. This affects the combos each character can do, with some being able to string 4 or 5 hits together, but do less damage with each hit, over another that may be able to pull off a 3-hit combo, albeit with stronger attacks. I did find the fact that the game uses a dash move and a dash attack meant that I never really saw a need to pick faster characters over stronger ones, and that's coming from someone that usually picks speed over strength in games as a rule. Mayhem Brawler does change things up a little though in terms of its conditions system. Damaging enemies may cause them to become afflicted with a particular condition, and this will then be displayed above their head. For example, you may cause them to become dazed, shown as a small bird symbol, and this will mean it's harder for them to get up if you knock them down. The bleed condition, shown as a drop of blood, will mean they take more damage for a short period of time. Some enemies will have a condition of their own which may work in their favour, such as vampire characters having a health regeneration condition, and you yourself can be afflicted by any of these at any point. The system isn't explained particularly well, apart from a chart in the options menu which shows you the symbol for each condition, and I have to admit it did seem completely random in terms of which one you may get. For example, one of the conditions is a big heart, which gives you an extra life, and I got this a few times, but I couldn't ever work out if it was owing to me getting a certain amount of points, or it was just pure luck. They do also lead to times where it almost feels as if an artificial difficulty spike is being created. On one level in particular, practically every enemy on the stage has health regeneration and will get health back whenever you knock them down. Having 3, 4, 5 of these enemies on screen at one time led to some very tedious sections, and I do feel as if the whole system could have been removed without the game really suffering at all. As mentioned, your characters are superhuman, so all have a particular ability which will affect how their special move works. There wasn't a huge amount of variation in the 3 specials, to be perfectly honest, perhaps a little in terms of things like range, but it was mainly a cosmetic change it seemed. Levels end with a boss battle, as I said, and these consist of 3 phases shown by the breaks in the boss's health bar. Knocking a boss down to their next phase generally results in a change of attacks and a call for reinforcements in terms of minor enemies entering the fray. I mentioned earlier that at certain points you will have a choice to make, and this will ultimately affect your ending, but as well as this there are also times where you can choose where to go next, and this will affect the next level that you play. This means you won't see every level first time round and encourages multiple playthroughs. I would guess this means there are around 10 to 11 levels in the game, but obviously you only ever see 7 in one playthrough. You can play the game in local co-op with up to 3 players, and additional players can drop in and out between levels. The number of enemies increases depending on how many players are involved, but in some levels I didn't feel this was implemented as well as it could have been. It can be quite hard to see which character is yours when there are many enemies on screen, and one character moving towards one side can mean the other character ends up off screen completely, which is quite a strange occurrence. It almost led to a feeling of the game being less fun in multiplayer at certain times, which just seems crazy for a beat 'em up. I want to make it clear this isn't all the time, they are minor grievances, but it is quite strange. There is a special move, as I said earlier, and a useful block which is performed by pressing R. This does come in handy, and there is that dash move too. There are a few minor niggles. Throwing a weapon towards an enemy is a bit fiddly owing to you having to press forward and throw, but generally controls work well. Gameplay sticks firmly to the classic beat 'em up formula, which is not necessarily a bad thing, and when it does deviate, to be fair, the results are mixed. Gameplay gets 14 out of 20. Controls assist the player far more often than not, with just a couple of minor gripes, and they get 17 out of 20. In terms of the visuals, Mayhem Brawler goes for a hand-drawn style, and I must say it's nice to see a beat 'em up that takes inspiration from the 90s but does step away from pixel art. The elephant in the room though that must be addressed is its style is incredibly similar to 2020's Streets of Rage 4, not just in terms of both having used hand-drawn art styles, but walk animations, items and weapons. It all just feels incredibly derivative at times. Character designs are pretty varied, and whilst you will see the same enemy type fairly often, par for the course in beat 'em ups, I will give the game credit for having quite a few level specific enemies too, and quite creative ones at that, although I do feel the characters in general just look a little too clean. The level of detail in terms of shadow and tone isn't as strong as the game that it seems to have taken inspiration from, and because of this the characters feel as if they are placed on top of an environment rather than being a part of it. Talking of backgrounds, and with a number of locations to visit, the variety here is fairly high, and I liked the subtle animations of people and objects as you move through the stages. It had a nice comic book brought to life feel to it. Performance wise, everything runs smoothly in both docked and handheld mode, with no noticeable frame dips at all even when the game gets hectic. In terms of the audio, each level has its own theme, and there appears to be multiple phases to each piece. You will sometimes hear the shift in dynamic as the level progresses and you approach the boss, for example, and I also liked how each track suited the level rather than there being an overall music style throughout. One level may have a heavy electric vibe, reminiscent of Yuzo Koshiro's Streets of Rage soundtracks, but then another, such as the Nosferatu stage, has a much slower burn to it. It doesn't necessarily mean I felt the tracks all came off, but I did appreciate this approach. Voice acting is used throughout the cutscenes and via character portraits through the levels at times, and the quality of this was most certainly mixed. Visuals make good use of the hand-drawn art style, and I liked some of the touches, but it does feel very derivative, and it scores 17 out of 20. Audio adopts an interesting approach and hits more often than it misses, and scores 16 out of 20. Mayhem Brawler costs £17.99 and regional equivalents are on your screen now. For this price you will get the campaign mode, which is 7 levels long, but don't forget has those path choices, meaning there are other levels to experience, and there is the fact that you can play the game with up to 3 players in local co-op. There is also an arcade mode which unlocks on completion of the campaign, which gives you 1 credit to try and beat the game. To be honest, I would have liked to have seen some sort of level select come into play once you finished it, rather than just a standard arcade mode, but at least it is a bit of extra content once you have finished. A single playthrough probably takes about an hour or so, but when you factor in those other levels and having to play to get the 3 different endings, I guess you'd have about 3 to 4 hours worth of content before you've seen everything. This is fairly standard for old school beat 'em ups, which it does assign itself towards, but newer games such as Streets of Rage 4 and Scott Pilgrim have also played the nostalgic card whilst having more content on offer for not much more if not the same price. For me, value scores 12 out of 20. To conclude, Mayhem Brawler is a fun beat 'em up which harkens back to the arcade era of the 1990s. Its hand-drawn art style is appealing, and the local multiplayer mode for up to 3 players does add value, as of course does the fact that there are multiple paths and 3 endings to strive towards. The condition system is a bit hit and miss, and there's one level in particular that almost put me off the game completely due to the constant health regeneration of practically every enemy on the stage, but aside from that there is a decent beat 'em up here, even if it's a little expensive for what it is. Mayhem Brawler gets a SwitchUp score of 76%. Thank you everybody for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do remember to leave a like if you did. Is this a game that interests you? Will you be picking it up? Let us know in the comment section below. And please do check out our best beat 'em ups video. Like I said, link to it in the top pinned comment. A quick thank you to our Patreons as always for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.